I want to be clear about something. I did not panic. I assessed the situation, identified my options, chose the least catastrophic one, and executed it with full confidence. The fact that the least catastrophic option turned out to be deeply, catastrophically wrong is a separate issue entirely, and I will not be taking questions at this time. My name is Tarn Calloway. I am 31 years old. I have a postgraduate degree in forensic accounting, a LinkedIn profile that makes recruiters emotional, and, as of approximately 40 minutes ago, absolutely no idea where I am. But I did not panic. Chapter 1. The Celestine. The bar on Deck 7 of the Celestine was the kind of place designed to make you feel like money, even if the money wasn't yours. Tarn didn't particularly care about the aesthetic. She cared about the outlet behind the bar stool and the fact that the ambient noise level was low enough to think. She had her laptop, her third sparkling water, and a forensic trail that wasn't going to follow itself. Around her, the cruise lived its best life. A couple slow danced near the window. Someone laughed too loudly at something that probably wasn't that funny. A man at the far end of the bar nursed a glass of something amber and watched the horizon like it owed him money. Tarn clocked him the way she clocked everything: quickly, categorically, filed. Tall, dark-haired, jaw that looked carved rather than grown. The kind of stillness that most people couldn't maintain in a loud room unless they'd had very specific training, or a very specific nature. Anomaly, she noted, and returned to her spreadsheet. The ship tilted. Not dramatically, just slightly. That particular shift in momentum that a body registers before the brain catches up. Tarn's fingers stopped on her keyboard. Around her, the music kept playing. The couple kept dancing. The man at the end of the bar set his glass down. She watched him stand, turn toward the window, and go very, very still in a way that made something ancient at the back of her brain say, "Pay attention." Outside, the sky had changed color. Not sunset changed. Wrong changed. A deep, pressurized green-gray that Tarn associated with exactly one thing: her meteorology module in second year, and the case study on catastrophic Atlantic storm systems. Oh, she thought. Oh, that's not good. She saved her document. She closed her laptop. She picked up her bag with the small emergency kit she'd packed because she trusted no one, including the sea. And she made one decision that she would spend the next 72 hours reconsidering. Instead of going below deck, she went up. In her defense, the emergency stations were also upward. The corridors below were already filling with people who hadn't read the safety card, and she had assessed that high ground was tactically superior. She had not assessed that the storm would arrive in 8 minutes instead of the 40 that logic suggested. She had not assessed the wave. The deck was chaos. Real chaos. The kind that moves too fast for competence to catch. Alarms now. Voices. The ship lurching with a groan that vibrated through the soles of her shoes. Tarn had her hand on the railing. She had her footing. She was, genuinely, 3 seconds from making it to the muster station when a second wave hit from the opposite side, the kind of rogue physics that didn't ask permission. And the railing she was gripping became the railing that swung her outward. The cold was instantaneous, the kind that doesn't feel like cold at first. It feels like impact, like being replaced, entirely, by something that isn't temperature so much as absence. She went under. She came up. She went under again. Stroke, kick, surface, think. The ship was tilting. She could see the lights listing at an angle that made her stomach understand something her mind was still refusing. A piece of hull debris. She grabbed it. Lost it. Grabbed something else. Something that wasn't debris. Something that moved. Something that grabbed back. Warm. Impossibly warm. Even here. Even now. Even in water that was taking the heat from her bones like it was owed. An arm. around her. A voice, close, low, completely, incomprehensibly calm. "I've got you. Stop fighting." She fought anyway, because she was Tarn Calloway, and she didn't have enough information yet to trust anything. The warmth didn't let go. Chapter 2. Warmth. The first thing she registered was heat. Not the ambient, apologetic warmth of a blanket or a heater. Something deeper. The kind that pressed through skin and settled into muscle like it had been given permission. Tarn surfaced into consciousness the way she did everything, taking inventory before opening her eyes. She was horizontal. Dry. Her emergency kit was gone, but her watch was still on her wrist. 6:14 a.m. She was breathing without effort. Her fingers moved when she asked them to. Her toes, I reluctantly, did the same. Someone was behind her. Very warm. Very close. Very much there. She opened her eyes, assessed the rocky shoreline, the pale morning light, the distant debris pattern on the water that told her the Celestine was not coming back. And then she turned around. The man from the bar looked down at her with gold eyes and the expression of someone who had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. "Good morning," he said. Tarn sat up so fast her vision whitened. "Get off me. I'm not on you. I'm beside you. Off!" She was already on her feet. Too fast, knees disagreeing, arms out for balance, refusing to fall in front of this man a second time. "Who are you? Where are we? How long was I unconscious?" Theron Kessler, an island approximately 11 nautical miles northeast of our last known coordinates. 23 minutes. She stared at him. "You timed it. You seem like someone who'd want to know." She had no answer for that, which was a new experience. Theron Kessler, it turned out, had been busy while she was unconscious. He'd found fresh water, a narrow stream inland, which he'd located faster than geography reasonably explained. He'd assessed the tree line for shelter material. He'd inventoried what washed ashore with admirable efficiency. Tarn watched him work and hated how competent he was about it. She was also competent, arguably more systematically. She cataloged the shoreline debris, estimated drift patterns, calculated their approximate position relative to the storm's last known tracking data, and identified which materials were structurally useful. They disagreed on where to build the shelter. "Closer to the tree line," she said. "Wind barrier. Visibility from the water for rescue signals." "The overhang," he said, nodding toward a rocky formation further up. "Stable. Elevated. Better overnight temperature retention." "Temperature retention doesn't matter if a rescue vessel can't see us." "A shelter you can't survive the night in doesn't matter if a rescue vessel arrives tomorrow." She opened her mouth, closed it. He wasn't wrong. She hated that he wasn't wrong. "We compromise," she said finally. "Build at the overhang, signal fire at the shoreline." He said, "That's what I was going to suggest." She picked up a piece of driftwood so she'd have something to do with her hands. They worked in efficient, pointed silence for most of the morning. He was stronger than he should have been. She noted this without comment, filed it, moved on. The shelter came together faster than expected. Her hands stayed occupied. Her mind stayed busy. Around midday, sitting at the shelter entrance while he reinforced the windward side, she became aware of a problem. She was cold again. Not dangerously, but the kind of sustained, grinding cold that accumulated, the kind her body was already depleted from fighting. She had no dry layers left. She had a watch, her analytical mind, and approximately 4 hours before the temperature dropped further. She could ask him. She absolutely was not going to ask him. She lasted 40 minutes. "I need body heat," she said, in the same tone she used to present audit findings. "Biologically, not, this is a thermal regulation statement." Theron turned from the wall he was reinforcing. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. And then he sat down beside her. Close enough. No comment, no smile. Which was somehow so much worse than if he'd smiled. Night came quickly. She didn't move away. Neither did he. And somewhere in the dark, when she was nearly asleep, she heard him exhale, slow, quiet, and something that sounded improbably like relief. She filed that too. Chapter 3, Day 3. By day 3, Tarn had a system. Morning, water collection, signal fire maintenance, debris survey. Afternoon, shelter improvement, resource inventory, calculated optimism about rescue timelines. Evening, sit at the shoreline, watch the horizon, and absolutely not think about how the man 12 inches to her left had heard the stream before she'd seen it. Tracked a bird pattern that turned out to indicate rain 2 hours before the rain arrived. Theron once turned his head sharply toward the tree line for no reason she could identify, only for a fox to emerge from it 4 seconds later. She was building a case. She just wasn't sure what the charges were yet. "You grew up outside," she said on the third afternoon. Not a question. Theron was resetting the signal stones. Why? You move like someone who learned to read environment before they learned to read text. Most people look at a landscape. You listen to it. He was quiet for a moment. My family had land. A lot of it. We spent more time outdoors than in. Where? Scotland, mostly. Some of northern Canada. Simultaneously? He almost smiled. Sequentially? She handed him a flat stone. What do you do? Professionally? Manage the family holdings. What does that mean? It means I'm responsible for a great number of things and a great number of people, and I came on this cruise because my assistant threatened to quit if I didn't take a break. Tarn looked at him. Did it work? The ship sank, so. She laughed. Actual, unguarded, surprised out of her laughter. The kind she hadn't heard from herself in long enough that it sounded slightly foreign. Theron went very still in the way she was beginning to recognize, the way that meant something had registered. She stopped laughing, cleared her throat. What are the holdings? Land. Some logistics. Some older industries I'm restructuring. Restructuring how? Why? Pattern recognition. It's involuntary at this point. You can tell me to stop. He handed the stone back instead of placing it, turned to look at her directly. I've never had anyone ask about the work before. They ask about the outcome, the scale, never the structure. She took the stone. The structure is where the real information is. Something in his expression shifted. Not dramatically, but the way light shifts when clouds move. Incremental. Meaningful. The restructuring, he said, is about making something inherited fit something current. The framework was built for a different time. The people inside it haven't changed, but the world around them has. I'm trying to close that gap without losing what matters. Tarn turned that over. It was a more honest answer than she'd expected, more considered. That's harder than building something new, she said. Yes, he said simply. It is. They sat with that. Evening arrived with a wind shift and a sky that bruised beautifully, deep indigo pressing down on the horizon's leftover orange. Tarn was tired in her bones, but not unpleasantly so. The kind of tired that comes from using yourself correctly. She caught herself watching him tend the fire, the way his hands moved, certain, unhurried, the way the firelight made his eyes do that thing, that gold-catching thing, that she'd stopped pretending wasn't unusual. She looked away. She made a mental note. Stop watching him tend the fire. She looked back. He was already looking at her. Neither of them said anything. The fire moved between them. Somewhere in the tree line, something stirred. And Theron's chin lifted just slightly, tracking it without alarm, and she thought, there it is again. Theron. Tarn. What was that? She nodded toward the tree line. Deer, probably. You didn't look. You just knew. A beat. Good hearing. How good? He met her eyes over the fire. The gold in them caught and held, and he said, very carefully, very deliberately, better than most. Most. Not better than average. Not pretty good. Most. She added it to the file. Chapter 4. The Pattern. She started writing it down. Not on paper. She had none. In her memory, which was where she kept everything important. A running document, mentally formatted, with headers. Subject: Theron Kessler. Anomalies. See below. Hearing. Consistently exceeds normal human range by observable margin. References confirmed auditory data before physical indicators present. Deer. Day 3. Rain. Day 2. Her waking. Day 1. He'd been ready before she'd made a sound. Body temperature. Sustained warmth, inconsistent with ambient conditions, hydration levels, caloric intake, or activity level. Not fever. Too stable. Too constant. More like a different baseline. Animal behavior. 4 separate incidents of wildlife displaying approach behavior toward him rather than standard avoidance. The fox. 2 birds that landed closer than birds land. This morning, a seal that surfaced and watched him from 10 meters out for an uncomfortable amount of time. She watched the seal. The seal watched Theron. Theron watched the horizon and said nothing. Does that happen to you often? She asked. What? Animals treating you like a landmark. I've always been good with animals. That seal looked at you like it was waiting for instructions. You might be developing island fever. I might, she said pleasantly, be identifying a pattern. He looked at her then. A long, assessing look that she returned without blinking, because she was Tarn Calloway, and she did not flinch from assessment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not alarm. Something more like consideration. You do that constantly, he said. Do what? Collect information, file it. I can practically see the folders. It's how I work. I know. He said it without judgment. What folder am I in? She considered lying, decided it wasn't worth the inefficiency. Unclassified, pending further data. That's the most alarming category, isn't it? Yes, she agreed. It is. That afternoon, he told her about the pack, without calling it that. He talked about his family the way people talk about something too large to describe directly. Obliquely, in parts, with careful word choices that she noted and stored. The people I'm responsible for, not employees, not family in the conventional sense. His, in a way that implied scale, loyalty, and something older than corporate structure. How many people? She asked. Hundreds across the holdings. Closer in, 30 or so who are core. And they all look to you. They were born to. She sat with that. That sounds lonely. He looked at the fire. It has been. Past tense. A pause that lasted exactly long enough to mean something. Past tense. Tarn looked down at her hands. Her chest did something she catalogued as physiological response to emotionally significant data and refused to examine further. She measured the distance between them automatically, 42 centimeters. She'd been measuring it for 2 days, not intentionally, initially. But it was always 42. Like he'd calculated it, like it was deliberate. Close enough that his warmth reached her. Far enough to be deniable. She stared at the 42 centimeters, at the fire, back at the distance. You're doing it again, he said quietly. Doing what? The folders. I opened a new one, she admitted. He didn't ask what was in it. He just looked at her with those gold fire-lit eyes, and the look said, I know. I've been waiting. Which was, she thought, It's the most sophisticated and most infuriating thing anyone had ever communicated to her without words. She did not close the 42 centimeters, but for the first time, she stopped measuring it. Chapter 5. What are you? She asked him on the fourth night. Not impulsively. Tarn didn't do impulsive. She'd been constructing the question for 36 hours, testing its weight, checking its load-bearing points. By the time she said it, it was structurally sound. What are you? The fire was low. The sky was unreasonably full of stars. The kind of density you only saw without light pollution, without civilization, without anything between you and the actual scale of things. He was beside her. 42 centimeters, as always. He didn't startle. He didn't deflect. He turned his head and looked at her with an expression that was almost fond. What do you think I am? She'd prepared for this. Something that shouldn't exist according to my current framework. Something biological, not supernatural, not performed. Whatever you are runs in the body, not the mythology. Your temperature, your senses, your... She paused. The way you pulled me out of that water. I was under. The current was significant. You moved through it like it was an inconvenience. Strong swimmer. Don't. He stopped. You've been 42 centimeters away from me for 4 days, she continued, voice level. Always exactly 42, close enough to share heat, far enough to be deniable. That's not instinct. That's awareness. You've been managing my comfort without being asked and without making it visible, which means you're either extraordinarily well-trained in emotional intelligence or you're operating on something more calibrated. The fire moved between them. I notice you, he said finally. More than I should. More than I can entirely explain. That's not an answer. No. He exhaled. It isn't. He was quiet long enough that she thought he'd chosen silence. Then, my family, the people I told you about, were different, physiologically, have been for as long as records exist. Stronger. Better senses. We run warmer. We heal faster. A pause. We're drawn, sometimes, very strongly to specific people. It doesn't happen often. When it does, it's... Don't say destined. I wasn't going to. Something that was almost a smile. I was going to say inconvenient. She looked at him. He looked back. The stars did their indifferent, massive thing above them. Is that what this is? She said. For you? Yes. Since when? The bar. You were the only person watching the storm before it arrived. She absorbed that. That's a very specific thing to notice. You're a very specific person. Tarn looked back at the fire. Her chest was doing the thing again. She let it this time. Just briefly. Just privately. Then she looked at him and said the only honest thing she had. Okay. He went still. Okay? You answered in the format I asked. Factual? No dramatics? Biological framing? She met his eyes. Okay. Something crossed his face. Too fast. Too unguarded. She caught it anyway. It looked like relief so profound it was almost undignified, and she was bizarrely moved by that, by the idea that her okay could do that to someone like him. She didn't close the distance. Not yet. But she leaned, just slightly, just barely, into the warmth. He didn't move, didn't make it a moment, just remained, steady and warm and 42 centimeters away. She was almost asleep when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the island, mechanical, distant but approaching. Theron was already sitting upright. That's a boat, she said. Yes. You knew. She turned to look at him. His expression was careful, controlled. You knew someone was coming. How long have you known? The mechanical sound grew louder. A light swept the water in the distance. Theron. Since this morning, he said quietly. The warmth beside her suddenly felt different, not less real, but complicated. She sat up fully, arms around her knees, watching the light get closer. "Who are they?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Wah, and in that silence, every folder she'd built, every pattern she'd mapped, every careful 42-centimeter night rearranged itself into a shape she hadn't seen coming. "Mine," he said. Chapter 6. Rescued Mine. 1 word, 4 letters. And somehow the most information-dense thing he'd said in 4 days. Tarn sat with it for exactly 3 seconds, which was how long it took the rescue vessel to swing its light across their shoreline, illuminating Theron's face in sharp relief. He was watching the boat, jaw set. Something in his posture that hadn't been there on the island. A subtle reordering, like a man putting on a coat he'd temporarily set aside. She didn't like it. She filed that. She didn't like it and stood up. "How did they find us?" "I have a locating system, biological. Difficult to explain. Try." "Not tonight." She turned to look at him fully. "Theron, you knew this morning. We spent today building a better signal fire. I recalculated our drift pattern for 40 minutes using tide data and emotional investment. The signal fire was still useful. I want to be furious with you right now and I need you to let me." A pause. "That's fair. Thank you." She picked up her bag, force of habit, there was almost nothing left in it, and faced the water. The vessel was close now, slowing, a rigid inflatable deploying from its side. 2 figures aboard, then a third, standing at the larger vessel's rail, very still, watching the shore. Something about the stillness was familiar. Not Theron's stillness. Different. More deliberate. The stillness of someone performing patience rather than possessing it. "Who's on the rail?" she asked. "My second." "Your second what?" He looked at her. In the sweeping light, his eyes caught gold. "In command. He manages things when I'm away." "And how does he feel about you being away?" "Deeply inconvenienced." The man's name was Rowan. Tall, severe, with close-cropped hair and the kind of face that had decided years ago that warmth was an inefficient use of resources. He helped Tarn into the inflatable with practiced courtesy, and then looked at Theron over her head with an expression that contained an entire conversation. Theron returned it with a slight shake of his head. Rowan's gaze moved back to Tarn. Brief. Assessing. She met it without blinking. Because she was Tarn Calloway, and she had been assessed by CFOs and federal investigators, and she was not going to be unsettled by a man in a performance fabric jacket on a rescue dinghy. He looked away first. She filed that. The vessel was warm and well-stocked, and staffed by 3 others who were excessively careful around her in a way that prickled, too deferential, too watchful. Like she was something significant they hadn't been briefed on. She was given dry clothes, food, water, and a small cabin. She used all of these practically, and then stood at the porthole watching the island disappear into dark water. 4 days. 1 shoreline. 42 centimeters. She was aware, in the specific way she was always aware of things she'd rather not be, that something had changed in the architecture of herself. Small. Structural. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself until you try to load bear from the old design and find it no longer fits. The door didn't knock so much as a presence arrived outside it. She opened it before he raised his hand. Theron stood in the corridor, changed into dry clothes, looking different. Not worse, just more finished somehow. Like the island version had been a working draft, and this was the published edition. "I came to say goodnight," he said. "You could have told me," she said. "This morning, you could have just said." "I know. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. The corridor was narrow. The ship moved gently. "Because it was the last morning," he said. "And I was selfish about it." She had approximately 9 responses to that and discarded all of them. He stepped back. "Good night, Tarn." She watched him go. And then she looked back at the porthole, at the place where the island had been, now just dark water and stars. 42 centimeters. He'd maintained it. Even here. Even now. She closed the door, sat on the edge of the bunk, and for the first time in 4 days, she was cold. Chapter 7. Kessler. She'd prepared herself for impressive. She had not prepared herself for old. Not old, like outdated. Old, like bedrock. Like the Kessler estate had been standing long enough that the landscape had grown around it rather than the other way. Stone the color of winter cloud. A tree at the gate that had no business being that large. And people, staff, residents, she couldn't quite tell, who moved through the grounds with the easy familiarity of those who had never once questioned whether they belonged somewhere. Tarn stepped out of the vehicle and immediately clocked 14 people, their relative proximity to Theron, and the subtle hierarchy visible in who moved toward him and who waited to be approached. "You have a whole thing here," she said quietly. "I did warn you. You said family holdings. You didn't say feudal estate. It's post-feudal. The stone says otherwise." He almost smiled. Almost. Someone appeared at his elbow. A woman, 50s, silver-haired with the energy of a person who had personally organized every significant event in the last 3 decades and would personally organize every one in the next 3. She spoke to Theron in a low tone, glanced at Tarn with the kind of neutral expression that took professional effort to maintain, and then withdrew. "Mrs. Hale," Theron said. "She runs the house." "What did she say about me?" "That your room is ready." "That's not all she said." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." Her room was in the east wing, which she suspected meant something about status she wasn't positioned to interpret yet. It was beautiful in an understated, confident way, like it didn't need to try. She had a desk. She was pathetically pleased about the desk. She was also given a tour she only half listened to because she was doing structural accounting in her head. By hour 6, the estate had revealed itself financially, the way things always did to her, involuntarily, in aggregate. The property holdings were substantial. The external business structure, from what she could infer through overheard references and the 3 documents she'd spotted on a desk she walked past, was not. And there was overlap between old infrastructure and new ventures that someone had been managing with optimism rather than architecture. That evening at dinner, long table, 12 people, more than half of whom watched her with polite, calibrated interest, she said nothing about any of this. She watched. She ate. She answered questions about herself with answers that were accurate, brief, and professionally unrevealing. Across the table, a woman named Sarah laughed at something Rowan said. She was composed, beautiful, pack-born in every line of her, the kind of ease that came from a lifetime of belonging. She spoke to Theron with the familiarity of long proximity. He responded with warmth. Tarn noted this without reaction, which took more effort than she would formally acknowledge. At 2 a.m., alone at her desk, she was completely honest with herself in the way she could only manage in private. She did not want to leave. This was inconvenient. This was illogical. She had a flat in Edinburgh, a client dossier due in 11 days, and absolutely no framework for whatever the last 4 days had been. She opened a new mental file, labeled it Contingency, Exit Strategy, started populating it. Then she closed it without saving. A knock. So quiet she almost missed it. She opened the door. Theron stood in the corridor. "You're awake," he said. "You knew I was." A pause. "Yes?" "The hearing." "Yes?" She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, looking at him. He looked back. The corridor was very quiet, and they were back to, she noticed, 42 centimeters. Your financials are a mess, she said. The external holdings. Someone has been structuring your new ventures through frameworks that were built for something 30 years older. You're bleeding efficiency. He stared at her. You've been here 6 hours. I notice patterns. It's involuntary. Something moved through his expression. Amusement, then something warmer, then something that settled into a look she didn't entirely have a name for yet. Good night, Tarn, he said softly. Good night. She closed the door, stood with her back against it. 3 seconds later, she heard him exhale in the corridor, the same way he had on the island, the night she'd stopped measuring. Like something in him settled. She went back to her desk, opened her laptop, and started a new document titled Kessler Holdings, Preliminary Observations. She told herself it was professional instinct. She almost believed it. Chapter 8. The candidate Sarah didn't try to be intimidating. That was the worst part. She was simply, genuinely, effortlessly good, in the way of someone raised to fit a role with grace. She asked Tarn thoughtful questions at breakfast. She laughed easily. She had excellent posture and a warmth that wasn't performed, and Tarn, who could identify performed warmth at significant distances, found absolutely no purchase for dislike, which left her with only one honest option, and she wasn't in the mood for honesty. How long have you known Theron? Tarn asked. All my life, practically. Our families have been close. Sarah poured tea with the ease of someone who'd done it in this room 100 times. He speaks well of you. He mentioned me. He said you were... A brief smile. Extraordinarily precise. That's diplomatic. From Theron. It's a declaration. Tarn looked at her tea. Sarah looked at her with an expression that was knowing without being unkind, the kind of knowing that comes from watching someone for long enough that you've catalogued their tells. She recognized the methodology. She didn't like being on the receiving end of it. The elders met that afternoon. Tarn wasn't invited. She was, tactfully, offered a tour of the grounds she didn't need. She took it anyway, because movement helped her think, and right now she had a great deal to think about. She was in the east courtyard when she heard them. Stone carried sound here without apology, a quirk of architecture, not intention. The gathering is in 3 days. A voice she didn't recognize. Elder, from the cadence. He hasn't decided. Rowan. He needs to. The longer he waits. He's aware of the timeline? Is he aware that the woman is a liability? A human, outside the pack? No lineage? No context? She's observant. Rowan's voice was careful. More than most. Which is precisely the problem. A pause she could feel the weight of from 30 feet away. Theron is attached, the first voice said, more quietly now. It's understandable. The island was an unusual circumstance, but attachment formed in extremity isn't architecture. He knows this. Silence. He knows this, the voice repeated, and nobody contradicted it. Tarn walked back to her room in the unhurried, even-paced way of someone who wasn't affected. She sat at her desk. She opened the Kessler Holdings document she'd been building and stared at it without reading it. Attachment formed in extremity isn't architecture. She put the voice's words through her forensic framework and found, with the particular misery of someone who is good at their job, that she couldn't argue with them. The island had been a pressure cooker. Stripped down, high stakes, 2 people with no buffers between them. Of course things had felt significant. Of course the 42 centimeters had felt like a decision. Of course his okay face had felt like something she'd earned. She closed the document, opened her flight booking app. Tomorrow morning was available. Direct. Edinburgh was gray and familiar and full of things she understood. She booked it before she could build a counter-argument. Her phone showed 9 p.m. Dinner was in an hour and she would not be going. She would send a note. She would be professional. She would not make this complicated. A knock. Tarn. His voice, low and certain, through the door. She looked at her phone, at the booking confirmation, at the door. I'm tired, she said. Good night, Theron. A long pause. Okay, he said. She heard him walk away. She sat very still, listening to his footsteps disappear, and felt something she didn't have a folder for yet, something with no clean label, settle heavily in the center of her chest. She stared at the booking confirmation. Then she started packing. Chapter 9. The dock, the estate, was quiet at 5 a.m. Tarn moved through it efficiently, bag on one shoulder, boots in hand until she hit the stone corridor outside, every exit she'd mapped on day one retrieved from memory with zero error. The east door, the south path, the wooden dock that extended into the water where the rescue vessel had transferred them yesterday, and which she'd noted and filed under contingency without fully acknowledging why. The morning was cold and blue dark, the water flat and pewter. Her car was booked for 6 a.m. She had time. She sat on the dock, bag beside her, boots on now, watching the water do its patient, ancient thing. She was not going to feel sad about this. She was going to feel pragmatic. She was going to feel clear-headed and appropriately self-protective and, "Your car isn't coming." She turned. Theron stood at the dock's edge, hands in his pockets, hair not quite arranged yet, looking like someone who had also not slept. He looked at her bag, then at her face. Then he walked the length of the dock and sat down beside her. Not across from her. Beside her. Same orientation, facing the same water. 42 centimeters. "What do you mean my car isn't coming?" she said. "I canceled it." "You..." She turned to look at him fully. "You canceled my car." "Yes." "Theron, that is a profound overstep." "I know." "You don't have the right..." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I was going to tell them tonight." His voice was quiet and level and completely undefended. "At the gathering, I was going to tell them that the decision had already made itself and that the rest was detail. I just needed..." A pause. "To know you weren't leaving first." She looked at him. The water moved beneath the dock. "I am leaving," she said. "I know." He met her eyes. "I'm asking you not to." She had survived a shipwreck. She had spent 4 days on an island with no resources and rebuilt herself every morning with what she had. She had walked into a world with no framework, cataloged it, held herself together with forensic discipline and pride and 2 mental folders she hadn't named yet. And this man, this infuriating, steady 42-centimeter man, had said, "I'm asking you," like it was the first time he'd asked for anything. Because it was. She looked back at the water. "Your elders think I'm a liability." "Yes." "Your whole world was built before I existed." "Yes." "I don't have lineage or context or whatever it is that makes someone legible to your pack." "No." "Then give me a reason," she said. "Not what you feel. Give me something structural, something that holds weight in the light of day, not on a dock at 5 in the morning." He was quiet for long enough that she thought she'd finally asked the question he couldn't answer. Then he turned to face her, and for the first time since the island, the 42 centimeters was gone. "You walked into a house full of people built for a different century," he said, "and in 6 hours you'd identified structural inefficiencies their financial team has been ignoring for 2 years. You don't need to be legible to them. You're already more useful than half my council." A pause. "And you are the only person who has ever asked me about the structure and not the scale." She looked at him. He looked back. The water was turning pale with the approaching dawn. "That's very practical," she said. "You asked for practical." She had. She had absolutely asked for practical. "My client dossier is due in 11 days," she said. I have Wi-Fi. I need my own space. A real desk. Not a guest room. There's an office in the West Wing that hasn't been used since. And I'm not making any decisions about anything else right now. I'm staying 3 months. That's the offer. Something crossed his face. Fast, unguarded. The same look as the island. She caught it again. 3 months, he said. Don't smile. He didn't smile. He absolutely smiled. And somewhere across the water, the first light arrived, thin and gold and entirely too poetic. And Tarn picked up her bag, stood up, and said, "Show me the West Wing office." He stood, fell into step beside her. "Tarn, don't." I wasn't going to say anything. You were going to say something insufferable. I was going to say good morning. She didn't answer, but when his hand briefly, barely, he found hers at the end of the dock and she didn't pull away. Neither of them mentioned it. They walked back toward the estate, the morning opening around them, and behind her the water caught the light and blazed. And in the West Wing window, very still, Rowan watched them return. His expression said nothing. His eyes said everything. Something had changed, and he was already deciding what to do about it. Chapter 10, 3 months later. The West Wing office had, in Tarn's professional estimation, been wasted on storage. It had north-facing light, the best kind for sustained focus, 2 original fireplaces that actually drew properly, enough wall space for a full documentation spread, which she'd covered in a structured map of the Kessler external holdings within her first week, color-coded by urgency, and which Mrs. Hale had looked at once with an expression that moved through alarm, then reluctant respect, then something approaching satisfaction. The desk was hers. She'd made that clear on day 2. Theron had moved her coffee mug to his side of it on day 4. She'd moved it back. He'd moved it again on day 5. She'd moved it back. This had continued, without comment, for 11 weeks, and had become, she would not say their thing, but it was unambiguously a thing. 3 months looked like this. It looked like Tarn, 7 weeks in, presenting a restructuring proposal to the full Elder Council with the calm of someone who had once made a federal investigator apologize. It looked like 2 of them arguing with her methodology and her holding her position with forensic patience until they ran out of counter-evidence. It looked like Rowan, at the end of that meeting, saying, with visible effort, "The analysis is sound." It looked like her calling Edinburgh twice a week, her flat sublet to a colleague, her client work managed remotely, on schedule, with 0 disruption. It looked like learning, slowly, the grammar of this world, not as an outsider trying to translate, but as someone building a working vocabulary, the hierarchy, the warmth inside it, which was more genuine than the formality suggested. The way the Core 30 moved around Theron, not with performance, but with the ease of long trust. It looked like Sarah over coffee in week 4 saying, "You're not what I expected," and Tarn saying, "What did you expect?" And Sarah saying, "Someone who needed him. You just want him. That's rarer." Tarn had looked at her tea for a long time after that. It looked like Theron, every morning, arriving at the West Wing office with coffee she hadn't asked for, black, right temperature, no comment, and sitting in the chair across her desk and reading, or working, or simply being there in that particular way of his that she'd stopped cataloging and started, quietly, counting on. 42 centimeters had become a private joke she only told herself. The real distance now was considerably smaller. She was deep in a revenue discrepancy. 3 years of external invoicing that didn't reconcile with the asset register, which was either sloppy bookkeeping or something she'd need to have a careful conversation about. When Theron brought the coffee, set it, as always, on his side. She reached across and moved it to hers without looking up. He sat down. She heard the quiet of him settling, and the specific frequency of his presence that she'd learned to distinguish from all other ambient data. She kept reading. He kept existing in her periphery. Warm, steady, insufferably patient. "You're going to be smug about this," she said, eyes still on the documents. "About what, specifically?" "All of it. The staying, the desk, the..." She gestured vaguely. "Everything." "Probably," he said. She went back to her documents. He went back to whatever he was reading. The fire moved. Outside, the grounds were doing their autumn thing, gold and deliberate. The kind of beauty that didn't ask for attention. She was almost back into the discrepancy when her phone buzzed. She picked it up, read the message, read it again. 3 words. From a number flagged in her contacts as Kessler External. Logistics. "We have a problem." And she set the phone down on the desk between them. Theron looked at it, then at her. She was already pulling the asset register back up, opening a new spreadsheet, her mind shifting into the clean, fast gear she trusted most. "How much do you know," she said, "about your northern logistics contractor?" Theron's expression changed. Just slightly, just enough. "Tell me," she said. And for the first time since the island, his stillness looked less like certainty and more like the moment before a storm. She didn't look away. She never did. And that's a wrap on Chapter 10 of the cruise ship Sank, and she woke up in the arms of a golden-eyed Alpha King. And honestly, Tarn and Theron have my whole heart. If this story got you, if you felt every single one of those 42 centimeters, you need to let me know. Head straight to the comment section right now and tell me where in the world you're listening from. I want to see the full map, every city, every country, every time zone that stayed up way too late for this one. This community is everything, and I want to know exactly who's in it. And listen, if you are serious about your romance audiobook experience, Eliana's Romance Library membership is where you need to be. Members get early access uploads before anything goes public, exclusive batch drops. Yes, multiple chapters at once. Plus every perk we keep adding as this library grows. You get more story, sooner, all in one place. I'll see you in the next story.